Well, what is the scientific evidence that urges you, that pushes you, that constrains you to believe in a Big Bang? Well, let's ask them. Let's ask the cosmologists, the people who suggest this Big Bang and inflationary model. Let's see what they say. I want you to look at the cover of this particular New Scientist magazine. Dr. Peter Coles wrote the cover story for this particular issue. Let me introduce you a little bit better to Dr. Peter Coles. Dr. Peter Coles is the professor of astrophysics at Nottingham University in the United Kingdom. Dr. Peter Coles has written several books, including From Cosmos to Chaos and the science textbook Cosmology. Now, when you ask who writes the books on this stuff, Dr. Peter Coles is it. He writes the book. Well, continue with me. Dr. Peter Coles has written over 100 technical articles on the Big Bang in periodicals such as Nature and Astronomy and Geophysics. He has been invited to lecture at the Oxford Astrophysics seminars. He has an undergraduate degree from Cambridge University and a PhD from the University of Sussex. Now, folks, this is not Kyle Butt's opinion on the idea of the Big Bang and the inflationary model. This is the statements, these are the statements that are made in Dr. Peter Coles' cover story of the New Scientist magazine. Well, Dr. Coles, what overwhelming evidence drives you, forces you to believe in the Big Bang? Well, let's see what he says. He says, inflation puts the bang in the Big Bang. Now, that's the title of his article. What put the bang in the Big Bang? What's responsible for everything you see? He says inflation did it. But now watch what he says about inflation. He says, well, there's very little direct evidence that inflation actually took place. He said, in fact, we still don't know what would have caused it if it did. So how confident can we be that inflation is really a part of the universe's history? Now hold on, Dr. Coles. You said that inflation put the bang in the Big Bang. But then he said, well, we just really don't have much direct evidence that inflation actually occurred. And you wonder how confident we can be that it really did occur. But then he goes on to say, Alan Guth cannot prove that this inflation actually happened, nor can he suggest a compelling physical reason why it should have. Within just a few years, inflation had become an indispensable part of cosmological theory. The only problem was there wasn't a shred of evidence that inflation actually happened. I thought you were supposed to write for us an article where you explain what put the bang in the Big Bang. You explained to us how this happened, and you did. You said inflation did. But then you said there's little direct evidence. In fact, Alan Guth can't prove it. And then you said quickly it became an indispensable part of a cosmological theory, but there wasn't a shred of evidence that proved that inflation ever occurred. Are you starting to see what's happening here? Richard Dawkins says, go to the physicists. They'll tell you. The physicists say, well, inflation put the bang in the Big Bang. It's got to be inflation. Well, can you prove to us inflation occurred? Well, no, there's really little direct evidence. In fact, there's not a shred of it. Continue with me. We don't know for sure if inflation happened. And we are certainly a long way from being able to identify the inflation. In a way, we are still as confused as ever about how the universe began, but perhaps now we are confused on a higher level and for better reasons. You know what I think a more appropriate title would have been for that article? Confusion taken to a higher level. Because he admits we don't have a clue how the Big Bang could have if it did take place, and what we say put the bang in it, we don't have it. Now listen to me. This is not Kyle Butt. This is Dr. Peter Coles with a PhD in this. We don't have a shred of evidence. Not only do they not have a shred of evidence that would suggest that a person should believe in the Big Bang or in atheistic evolution, there's overwhelming, compelling evidence against such. You see, because everybody recognizes that sooner or later you have to get back to a first cause. But you know what they know? They know that it cannot be a material cause. Because they have studied matter and energy so much, they know that it had to have a cause. It couldn't have come from nothing, but whatever caused it can't be matter. What did cause it? What could be a cause that came before this material universe that was bigger than this material universe? I think you well know. In the beginning, God. How do you describe God? The Bible suggests to us that God is all-powerful, almighty. That would take care of the criterion that He is big enough. The Bible also describes for us a God that is from everlasting to everlasting to take care of the criterion that He is before this material universe. The only logical, reasonable explanation to this universe is that the first cause is God. Well, someone will say, yeah, but the law of cause and effect says that for every material effect you have to have a cause that came before it. What cause came before God? Listen to what the law of cause and effect says. For every material effect. It's a scientific law that has been framed studying matter and energy. God is outside of that. You can't do an experiment on God. And every philosopher understands that an infinite regress is not an adequate answer. There has to be a first cause, and it cannot be material. What is it? God.